same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And this is what we are faced with. And this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington in this campaign, we're coming to get our check.
Welcome to Seen and Heard podcast, where everyone should be seen and heard. And my co-host Charles, hello, welcome on our Juneteenth.
Hi.
Yeah, our Juneteenth.
Happy Juneteenth.
Yes, and that was Martin Luther King. I like that video. His daughter posted that earlier today, and I was trying to repost it on TikTok, but they kept muting it like twice. So I was just like, okay, I'll just repost it. Anyway.
Oh, it's because all his stuff is patented, and you can't have any of his speeches. Hey, Fiercely Boss has joined us. Which is unfortunate. So that's probably why it's getting muted. This is kind of a side note. I'm not super thrilled about Coretta Scott King. I feel like the way she tightened King and the King estate and made it very exclusive. I'd rather his stuff be out there much more freely, but now, you got to pay for it. So you got to pay royalties. So,
well, and that was just a little snippet, and that's what his daughter posted. And I was like, that you know how Republicans are always misquoting. Of course, they always misquote.
Yeah.
So
the fake King.
I've never heard them quote that speech. I've never heard them quote that.
No, let's be honest. Do you hear Democrats doing it either?
That's true too.
In fact, I'd say everything he just said, which is so plain, so obvious. So this is, for example, this is what you'd learn in ethnic studies or African American studies. Presumably in critical race theory. When you're dealing with law, you have to understand how the law was specifically written and designed illegally to expressly exclude Black people from government loans, etc. I mean, there's a very ugly laundry list of things that were given white families, white men, that were very explicitly not provided to Black people. And so this is a generational policy that created the situation today. So there is a responsibility for those who care or those who want to pretend like they care to actually show and prove. So that's, so Juneteenth, when we talk about reparations, these are white scholars and economists who are crunching these numbers to show the amount of wealth extracted from Black people and Black communities to build the tremendous wealth of today's United States of America. So if you're very proud and you like to wave the flag and say America's the greatest country, then you're also probably someone who says you've got to pay your dues. You can't. There's no such thing as a free lunch, right? You don't get handouts, right? No free handouts. Okay, well, how about generations of free handouts? So, again, there's a disgusting level of double standard here. It's immoral. It's morally cowardly to live in a country and to be all patriotic when you won't do right, and you're just too you're too chicken shit to do what's right. And that's not honorable. It's not impressive. um,
I
it's
noticed with the swell of the reparations conversation that was happening over the past couple of years, the swell was getting larger and larger and larger, which rightfully so. Like you said, America has to redress, and we really can't go any further until those harms are corrected and addressed. That's just just a fact. So
right. And I want to make it clear when we're talking about reparations, okay? um uh, you know the immediate criticism is, oh, I never owned slaves, so you want me to pay money out of my pocket to black people? Okay, this is literally not what we're talking
mhm,
about. So we're first and foremost, I want to emphasize, I want to focus on the fact, and this is something that Manning Marable talked about. I don't know if you're familiar with Manning Marable. He was a professor at USC, and um, just to remind you that when thinking about the question of reparations, think about it's a lot like a civil case in court.
mhm.
First, you decide who's culpable, who's at fault, etc. Then you decide what the what the redress, or whatever. What do they call that
Redress,
in
yeah.
court?
Mhm,
There's some word for it, but basically what the
mhm.
um, what the financial reward is going to be. Now, for example, you could say, okay, if it's not just going to be a flat out cash um, handout, it can be exactly what Dr. King was talking about. It could be, home loan, low to no interest home loans for Black people. It can be come in the form of free university education for Black people. It can be what I wanted to suggest today. My kind of agenda was, what I'd like to see is, you're going to mention this later, but how Juneteenth is exploited by corporations, and so all these Black people go out and buy all this Juneteenth merchandise and to celebrate and things like that, and that money leaves their community. How about a reinvestment requirement where, if you're going to do business in the hood or whatever, or you're going to do this kind of thing, there should always be some sort of redistribution of that wealth. I think this should be done across the board. I think that every company, and that used to be what we called progressive
Mhm,
tax.
mhm.
Um, the top bracket used to be under Republican Eisenhower, war hero, was 93%. Um, so, and then it's stabilized at 91%, but it was as high as that. So, now today you pretty much have capital's gain tax. That's about it. It's 15%, which is half of what I pay, and I'm broke.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, uh, even what's his name, Warren Buffett, very publicly said, it's outrageous that I pay half the amount of taxes that my housekeeper does.
Here is just a little tweet that a friend of mine and I shared earlier, where she made the comment, like what we're talking about. She said, instead of the United States government paying reparations to Black Americans for slavery, we received a federal holiday to which most Black Americans still have to work. I said,
Mm.
exactly. Black people were already celebrating Juneteenth. Now, white owned corporations have monetized and gentrified the holiday to benefit themselves and increase the wealth gap of Black Americans. I mean, it's just, it's just performative.
Right, and always expect, especially Democrats, to do the performative thing,
Hmm.
because it's no skin off their backs, and they get brownie points for it. They can say, I'm pro-black, and I'm not against making it a national
Right.
holiday. I'm very in favor of it.
Hmm.
I think it's. I was frankly shocked, because I
Well, the
I
reason they
celebrated
did
Juneteenth.
that, and in such, the way they did it was because people were making uh, uh, observations of how fast the Asians got their hate crime bill passed, how fast it happened,
Mhm.
and then this bill or this law that they passed for the federal holiday happened right after like George Floyd. So they thought that was just
Right.
going to be an appeasement. Like I said,
Yeah.
it was just performative. That's not what the
Yeah.
community asked for.
Yeah. And I think it's not accidental
Hmm.
that Asians were so quickly able to get whatever it is that was felt that was needed, and that Black people just can't.
Hmm.
I think it's non coincidental. It's symptomatic of a deep, deep part of the culture and the mindset of America. I mean, there is this very visceral fear, suspicion, hatred, because it's kind of like, if we give them a little bit, we're going to have to come to terms with all the horrors
Hmm.
that we've done.
Exactly.
So it's easy to say, okay, we'll give Asians, we'll give them some breadcrumbs, but you can't do that with the Black community, because it's like, well, they literally made the loaf. What are we supposed to do? Give them the whole loaf? Right? It's too massive to imagine what reparations to Black people would be like when they built this country and they built the wealth. And it's not just the South that benefited. I want to remind people that it's not like, well, I'm from a northern country. Our family was for the Union, and this and that. Take a look at how wealth looked, and the fact that the North also got wildly rich off the Southern cotton, King Cotton, and I think we don't fully appreciate what cotton meant at that time. Um, Let me put it to you like this: in Korea, cotton was used as currency. I mean, that's how prized cotton was, along with silk. So the whole world was clamoring for cotton. I'm sure anyone listening to this podcast can't imagine, wearing their undershirt, and their underwears and such in anything but cotton. Imagine wearing something out of hemp or ramie or jute. I mean, it's just, imagine wearing a burlap. You just want to shoot yourself. Or even wool, which is a wonderful fiber, but it's still
Not
itchy
for
as fuck.
underwear.
Yeah, exactly. So let's not forget the tremendous amount of wealth that Europe benefited from, and this also plays into imperialism, because let's not forget that, for example, Egypt at that time could have would have been a major competitor to the South for King Cotton, and there was a deliberate kind of um, it was the British Empire and the nastiness, the games they played. I mean, you can look that up. It was a deliberate sabotage there with Egypt, and remember, actually comes from I think India or China. Sorry, I've forgotten.
It,
But
in India, the silk is from the China.
yeah, I think that might be right. At any rate, but the Chinese had access to cotton very early on,
Hmm.
and the um, the imperial system, or I think I mentioned this last time. James Watt and the beginning of the Industrial Revolution and mechanized power. They were passing laws, for example, in India, that they couldn't weave their own textiles, even though they learned textile patterns from the Indians, because India had a very robust and sophisticated textile culture, where they created their own textiles, and they took that and they took the raw resources from India, spun them in England, in the big water mill run and steam run factories in northern England, and then sold them back to India. So this it's not just the South. It's not just the North. It's not just Europe. I mean, everyone was getting rich off the backs of the blood, sweat, and tears of Black Americans and Black American children. Let's not forget how important children were to picking cotton because they could get the low-lying stuff. Um, the level of cruelty, of just callousness to think, great, one of my slaves gave birth. In a couple of years, this little guy is gonna
Just
be a
like
real
cattle.
producer and increase the efficiency of my plantation.
Just like cattle. And it was just like that. And then speaking of this chart here of reparations payment from 1990, or from 1865 to 1990, the and this list who has gotten reparations, like with the Japanese Americans. I'm actually working with a Japanese American group that's trying to get us Black Americans reparations. But here the Japanese got paid 1.6 billion, 20,000 each. Jewish claim 25 million, and the Jewish people are still getting reparations right now. Um, and then here, where Germany, 822 million Holocaust survivors, which they're still getting those payments right
There
now.
were also reparations. This could be a better list. There was also reparations paid by Germany after World War
Well, yeah,
One as
that's
well.
right there. At the bottom,
No,
that's
this
from Germany.
that's after is that
Germany,
after World War One? No, see, that's
after World
1952.
War II. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
German,
what I'm saying.
German
After
Jewish.
World War One, they were also forced to pay reparations, which is largely what triggered World War Two.
Mm,
Furthermore, the other reparations they're ignoring is Haiti paying reparations to France for over 100 years,
right.
um,
To keep
for
them
all the
poor.
slaves they liberated
Right, to keep them poor though, to
through their
do that,
revolution.
punish them. Yeah, that punish them. But
Right.
basically,
Well,
the
no,
what
it
I was
wasn't a punishment. It was reparations. They had to pay reparations to France because France claimed, hey, this is capitalism. Rightfully, that, hey, we had, let's say, whatever they claimed at the time was probably something like $100 million worth of slaves and plantations, etc. Now you owe us that, you know. And
well,
in
that's like
today's
the
world
slave
court, they
owners
would have
here.
110% won that
You know,
case.
the freed slaves were supposed to get 40 acres and a mule. They didn't get anything, but the slave owners got reparations and land.
Okay, the 40 acres and a mule thing was only in the United States,
Hmm.
and it wasn't any kind of law or anything. It was a letter that was written by a Union general under Reconstruction that suggested that the best way to deal with this huge population now of newly liberated slaves, he suggested that 40 acres and a mule ought to, um, be implemented to help, again, and reconstruction is this black hole of American history that we never learned much about, but we need to remember that during reconstruction we had more black congressmen then than we had today. So it was a very good time. The South looks at it as a time that they were occupied by northern armies, et cetera, et cetera, and they look at it with shame, and it was seen as a time of carpetbaggers and scallywags. Uh, it's a vilified time in our history, but that was we should have never ended Reconstruction because the complicit Democratic Party, which was always the Dixiecrats, the pro slave owner faction of the United States, was always the Democratic Party. When Samuel Johnson came in, he agreed because he didn't really win the election. He's like, okay, well, fine, I'll end Reconstruction. How's that sound? And because of that, then you have the institution of Jim Crow, the founding of the KKK, and white supremacist terrorism, and that set black people back until a generation ago. So,
Well, the point of this chart, though, is what I'm saying here. Black America, with
yeah,
everybody
everyone else
that's
has
on
gotten
the
the
list,
reparations except for black people. I
right?
know, it's great.
Everybody but black people have got, and then on top of that, the argument, like none of these other groups that got reparations, rightfully so, that are and then like Holocaust people are still getting reparations. None of these people got any pushback when it came to, like, they didn't get like, oh, we got to do
Yeah,
studies for this and this and this. Only the
right,
black community has gotten pushback like that, and it's
right, right,
utterly
right.
ridiculous. And so now
Yeah,
they're panicking. That's why they want to erase history
yeah,
and not
and
have
I
people
think
learning.
yeah, and I think that's an important point to say that there is such a visceral reaction against reparations for Black people and for slavery,
Mhm.
whereas no one would bat an eyelash with all the list that you showed.
Nope.
There's zero controversy around it. Not even the most ardent, vicious, hateful white supremacists would sit there and waste their time arguing against those kinds of reparations. And yet, of course, again, when it comes to slavery, when it comes to Black people, it's just this knee jerk reaction to just automatically
Hmm.
ridicule, you know, just be very vehement. Again, it can be done in different kinds of ways.
Hmm.
You can create scholarship programs, you know, low to no interest loans.
And they could
Um,
suggest not paying taxes because the taxes that black people are paying these cops that are killing them in the streets.
that's
I
right.
mean, that's just a suggestion. That's one of the suggestions. And then
Right.
when people are like, "Oh, where's the money going to come from?" They never, for the other groups, like we said, that got
Right.
reparations, they never once asked where the money was coming from. Also,
Right.
if you want to find out where it comes from, the insurance companies that
Yeah.
had insurance policies on the slaves that
Okay.
paid the
So
slave owners.
right. Right.
Wall Street, they sold
Right.
slaves. They built their
Right.
whole wealth off of slaves.
Right.
So
So
there's money
so
there.
yeah. So the banks have
The
been,
banks.
you know, so for example, Washington Mutual doesn't exist anymore, but WAMU was directly tied to the slave trade.
Hmm.
Like you said, the insurance companies, and they have the calculations.
Yeah.
They know how much it was,
Hmm.
and it was considerable. And like you said, I mentioned this in the other podcast about Wall Street, and how originally Wall Street was an actual wall to keep
Hmm.
out Native Americans, and it was originally, a slave market. They are a market. They bring up a cow, they bring up a goat, they bring up a slave.
Hmm.
And then before that, it was the site of an Indian massacre. So this is the blood soaked earth upon which America was founded. So that's why um, people in the Midwest, and whatever in the South, and a lot of white people who are baffled and confused that people object to their uncritical waving of the American flag. They have huge blind spots as to what America's legacy is and has been.
Hmm.
That, again, the whole world besides them knows about. Every human adult that has access to any kind of information at all is well aware of this. And to think that you and your ilk are so wildly and blissfully ignorant of this is a tremendous um, um, demonstration, of your moral capitulation, of your moral failure, that you've failed as a human adult to have the most basic kind of modicum of morality that you regularly employ when it comes to yourself and everybody else. And it's just all of this except when it comes to Black people. And then
Hmm.
to say, oh, I'm believing a colorblind society and this and that. I mean, the level of hypocrisy and absurdness that you exhibit in that moment is embarrassing and is shameful to you. So, I mean, there's not a lot of positive things to say on this Juneteenth. So, um, you know, if you want to step up and be an ally, if you want to, demonstrate that you have a lot more moral courage, as you like to think yourselves having, then do it. Step up. Be accountable. Address morality. Be a good Christian. But you won't. You're not. And that's what's so sad. You will kill us and jail us before you step up to your adult tasks and your adult responsibilities. That's how pathetic you are, and it's embarrassing.
Well, and on that note, I want to play this video real quick and get your thoughts on the other side. But when you're talking about how they are ignorant to it, I blame the education system, which is purposefully doing it to them because, like I said, if they don't know, they won't fight for redress to the people that were harmed, or the descendants of people that were harmed. So I'm going to play this video really quick and get your thoughts on the other side.
I read a New York Times piece on a 100-year-old survivor of the Tulsa Massacre. And my question was this: what's the Tulsa Massacre? How is it that it wasn't until 2 years ago that I heard about the Tulsa Massacre? How is that possible? I've heard about Custer's Little Bighorn. I heard about the Alamo. I heard about the Triangle Waste Fire. I heard about all kinds of disasters in which people died. But I had never heard about this thing that happened in 1921, only 3 years before my dad was born. In the same year that Donna Reed was born, we didn't hear about this thing that happened in which essentially one of the most black communities in America, Black Wall Street, in which everybody was not only burned out of their homes and their businesses, but then driven out of the city limits by an angry mob of, I'm sorry, white people. How is it that this was not taught to me? And that's not right, and it made me mad.
Oh man, Tom Hanks.
Yeah, I've seen that video before, and I'm really glad that Tom Hanks, America's favorite actor by far, that he was able to just be frank and honest, and that was also my coming of age. I never heard about the Tulsa Massacre until a couple years after I graduated from college, and it was like, wait a second, I went to an elite school, got a top-notch education, fluent in multiple languages. I mean, I have every kind of, did an honors thesis. I mean, I did every kind of academic accolade, and I didn't know one of the most basic facts and realities about America and what happened in Tulsa, and then I learned, after I learned about Tulsa, I learned that this was a semi-regular occurrence, that black towns, villages, etc., all over the United States were torched and massacred, and there was white riot. And this is why during BLM I was so upset that white people were so paranoid and scared and showing up and intimidating protesters with AR-15s, and battle gear and tactical gear, and intimidate, which is an act of terrorism to prevent someone from protesting with using weapons and such. Because it was a moment of projection. White riot is their thing, and they just naturally assume other people as rageful and black massacres. Oh, cool. Well, there we go. So if you look at that list, there we go. Good. If you look at that list, you'll see that the time between them, again, is a fairly regular thing. Mm-hmm. So that anyway, I'm glad you had that graphic.
And for the white people that are trying, and that's how propaganda works. Like, yes, there are violent people in every demographic, every group or what of people, but for them to frame, that's one of the reasons, again, why I refuse to anymore watch any American TV shows, the propaganda shows that they portray stereotypes of black people, minority people, this of that nature. It's galling to me, because I'm like you. The high school I graduated from was it was a majority white high school, but it was Jefferson Davis High School in Montgomery,
Jesus.
Alabama. Okay, so I'm from Montgomery, Alabama. I did not learn until after I graduated high school, 1986, that started to learn the true Black history. Even though my parents were part of the civil rights movement, they didn't talk in detail about a lot of the things that I learned of what Black people, what they went through. It wasn't like they were ashamed. I think that they did not want to. I was a sheltered child, and I think they looked at it as a way of trying to protect me, in a sense. But I did not learn, like you guys, a lot of this stories until after high school, till I moved out of Alabama. And so that tells me this is all by design. And then I'm seeing how these white governors are reacting. DeSantis and Abbott and all these governors freaking out and saying we've got to shut this down. They're trying to shut this down as fast as possible because of the conversation that's growing of reparations. They don't want to be held accountable. They want to keep people stupid, and they just want to even breed their own people because their numbers are dwindling. So they're trying to reverse all of this as fast as they can.
Mhm. Sure. Yeah, I mean, I have, I'm mixed, I have a little bit mixed feelings about it. In a lot of ways, I kind of want them to blow their load on this, and the only thing I've seen come out of this is a tremendous amount of free publicity on these issues. So,
Mm.
um, uh, um, I thought I would die before I ever heard the words critical race theory ever mentioned on the mainstream media, and they pulled it out of obscurity. That was a very academic thing. I have the critical race theory reader. So if you guys are interested,
Mhm.
there's it's basically a textbook. I don't know if you know what a reader is. It's where they compile abridged versions of the most important.
Yeah, like a
Uh,
Cliff Notes.
yeah, but a lot.
More.
No, actually, no, it's not like Cliff Notes because it's not a summary.
Okay.
It's abridged versions of the actual article. So it's actually
Okay.
primary sources. So they take all the most important, famous, influential articles that moved that academic discipline forward, and get abridged versions of them and collect them into things called readers.
Mm.
So, the
Okay. Yeah.
post-colonial studies reader, the critical race theory reader, so, and you can get it directly from the horse's mouth that way. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of bizarre
So
that.
we will post you have links to them. So if you give me the links when I edit the video
Okay,
after our
sure.
show, then I could post them in the description box.
Okay, sounds good.
So while he's doing that, we'll take like a little break here. So we have
Oh, we're
uh
doing that now.
no, no, no. I'm just
Oh,
no, not right this second, but I'm gonna show off some of our merchandise. So listeners, if you would like to support our show, and you, you see the QR code here for our mugs. We have mugs, we have bags, and we are peer supported. So we appreciate your support, and that helps us with producing our shows and getting the equipment we need so we can make better shows for you. We have bags and we have t-shirts here also.
and
Hey, look at
Sharon sent
that!
me a microphone,
See?
and I finally picked up, finally put it all together just now. So I just did the
Yay!
unboxing a little bit earlier. So I think I figured out most of it. I think it's correct, more or less. It's the spit guard here. So
Yeah, so you just
I just
need
need to
the
get the little
adapter.
adapter. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm glad you like it. I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, it's cool. I've never had like fancy schmancy. So
Yay. So, yeah, so go ahead and scan our QR codes and you can support us and we thank you for your support. And I am going to so we're that was like our little intermission there, so but I'm glad
oh,
to see that,
it's
Mike. I'm
done.
glad. So no, no, we're not done. So now we're twins. So I got one too.
Oh, okay. How come you don't use it?
Well, I have this one. I have this one hooked up here.
Oh, you have another one. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's why I sent you that one. Yeah. But we still have the because that was like a double set. So I bought it like all at once. It was a double set. So it just gave an extra mic. Let me see. I'm gonna play. I wanted to play this interview with a little bit of the interview with Fountain Hughes, which was he was a freed slave from one of the early freed slaves from Juneteenth. But this interview is 1941, so I can't play it because the audio won't play on our recording here. But I will post a link in the description for the interview. You can listen to it. It's only like 29 minutes, 12 seconds, and you can find it at the Library of Congress. So I will post that link for you guys to listen to. But there is a video, a little video I could play where this lady talks about him to give you an idea.
I like to play a recording for you of the voice of Fountain Hughes, an ex-enslaved person. Fountain Hughes was sold for a mere $590. His grandfather was enslaved by President Thomas Jefferson.
Listen again to Fountain Hughes, who was born in 1848.
We were slaves. We belonged to people. They sell us like they sell horses and cows and hogs and all like that. Have an auction bench and they put you up on the bench and bid on you the same as you're bidding on cattle, you know. Now I couldn't go from here across the street, or I couldn't go to nobody's house without I have a note or something from my master. And if I had that pass, that was what we call a pass. If I had that pass, I could go wherever he sent me, and I'd have to be back. You know, whoever he sent me to, they'd give me another pass, and I'd bring that back. So it's a show how long.
Even emancipation didn't truly free the slaves. Freedom freed slaves for more travail. The end of the Civil War found many cast adrift without skills and no place to go. And the Yankees who freed them weren't always seen as benevolent liberators.
I remember when the Yankees come along and took all the good horses and took sold all the meat and flour and sugar and stuff out in the river and let it go down the river. And they know the people wouldn't have nothing to live on, but they done that.
The ex-slaves left one hell for another, perhaps an even more dangerous one. No longer property, they didn't have the protections afforded property.
When we were slaves, we couldn't do that, see? And if we got free, we didn't know nothing to do. And my mother, she hunted places and bound us out for $1 a month. But we didn't have no property, we didn't have no home. We had nowhere, nothing. We didn't have nothing on it, just lazy cattle. We just turned out and get along the best you could.
So that's very interesting. I was actually talking to someone who said that, believe it or not, her father was born to a sharecropper. And that's kind of what he's pointing out, that in a lot of ways, things got even worse once slavery ended. Now, sure, you weren't property anymore. You had your liberty, but your freedom was relatively, limited. It's not like you necessarily could just sort of go around anywhere, again, Jim Crow. Maybe they couldn't just kill you at will, more or less. But what seriously declined was that when you went into sharecropping, these were not formal arrangements, where they could kind of indefinitely keep you in debt, the landowner, and you're giving up, a huge fraction of your overall, and so, at least under slavery, theoretically, a clever businessman would want efficient plantation, and thereby, at the very least, hopefully would take relatively good care of you, so that you would be efficient for the plantation. Once it turned into a sharecropping relationship, I mean, you could starve to death on the side of the road. It just literally, that doesn't compute. It doesn't matter. They just need to extract as much profit out of you. So yeah, the situation just it really kind of went from bad to worse in a lot of ways. It's just
And
it's so sad.
that's how they ratified or used the 13th Amendment. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. And so, like what he was saying, they were turned out, they had no place to go. Then they came up with the vagrant laws,
Right.
and then that's how they started the prison
Right. So
industrial.
so to point out what vagrancy laws were is, like, you've seen signs that say like no loitering.
Hmm.
These were all invented at that time to
Yep.
target idle black men. I mean, they were
Right.
unemployed, right? um Today we think of them as day laborers hanging out at the Home Depot. They
Right.
were hanging around looking for work, and you could just sweep them all up, put them on a chain gang. And I want to remind you that these chain gangs, um the death rate was 99%. In other words, it was a death sentence. They
Hmm.
literally worked you to death. Again, if you paid for a slave, you weren't going to literally work that slave to death. But if you're on a chain gang, it's
Hmm.
free labor.
Right.
Okay, work them to death. Also, the what was the racial composition of chain gang? Once again, it was 99% black. So did slavery really end? I say, most certainly it didn't.
No, it did not. And then speaking of which, let's see, the 13th, uh, let's see here,
Well, we can
Mississippi
also talk about
actually.
how the 13th Amendment was used to create corporate personhood, and it's a whole
Oh
ugly.
yeah, yeah. It's there. I'll tell you what. I did watch that documentary that Ava DuVernay
I haven't
did
seen
with
it, but
Juneteenth. Oh my
I
God,
can
that
imagine how annoying it.
the
I haven't watched it
detail.
yet because I know I'm just going to get really upset.
Well, I mean, like I sat there and watched it with the kids. I watched it with the kids when they were home. Let me pull this up here. But yeah, it's I cannot even stress how much people need to watch it. Like it's
Oh,
like you have
it's an
got
important
to watch
historical
it.
fact that we all need to know, that the thing that was supposed to free slaves then led to corporate personhood. And
Hmm.
there's also another little thing to that. The whole corporate personhood thing too is an invention by a clerk. That was revealed recently by the radio show. What's his name? The Tom. Anyway, Tom Hartman.
Hmm.
Thom Hartman. I think that's how you spell it. And he has a radio show. It's national, and I believe he's the one that dug it up, and he found that the guy that talked about corporate personhood wrote that in the abstract on a Supreme Court justice clerk. He was the former CEO of a railroad, a small railroad company corporation, and and the chief justice was furious that he wrote this fictional abstract about corporate personhood, and then was going to correct it, but then of course he died before the next session happened, so that was
Hmm.
never corrected. So it's it's a corporate coup d'état that we live in.
It's on. It's still on Netflix, I believe. Let's
Yeah.
see. Yeah, yeah. It's it's hard. It's harder. Well, but you're an empathic person, so um, because I felt the exact same way. I was like, I don't know if I could because, but I made myself sit there and watch it with the kids because, and then they thanked me. Actually, they were just like, thank you. They were like,
Well, another thing that's just not taught in schools, which is
it's not.
outrageous. I mean, if anything, that's what should be taught. And that's exactly like you were saying, the failure of the education system. That's why we're able to have the MAGA Trumpers, because they don't know facts.
And I think it's also
They're spoon fed this mythologized hero version of American history instead of the supreme viciousness and cowardice of American history.
Okay, I'm gonna play the trailer. I have to do that, and I think it's also free if you don't have Netflix. I believe it's free on YouTube. The full 13th documentary is on YouTube. I'll have to double check, but I believe it's free on YouTube. So here's the trailer.
1 out of 4 human beings with their hands on bars, shackled, in the world are locked up here in the land of the free.
Khalif Browder was walking home from a party when he was stopped by police.
Then they said, we're gonna take you to the precinct, and most likely we're gonna let you go home, and then I never went home.
The 13th Amendment to the Constitution makes it unconstitutional for someone to be held as a slave. There are exceptions, including criminals.
The loophole was immediately exploited. What you got after that was a rapid transition to a mythology of black criminality.
Some people got the real problem. Animals, beasts that needed to be controlled.
You better believe it.
I'm only human.
It became virtually impossible for a politician to run and appear soft on crime.
The kinds of kids that are called super predators.
Millions of dollars will be allocated for prison and jail facilities.
3 strikes and you are out.
It was an enormous burden on the black community, but it also violated a sense of core fairness.
Some people got the real problem.
States were required to keep these prisons filled, even if nobody was committing a crime.
It's so difficult to talk about mass incarceration because it has become heavily monetized.
The focus is on taking people from prison, putting them in community corrections, parole, and probation.
How much progress is it really if now there's a private company making money off the GPS monitor?
We now have more African Americans under criminal supervision than all the slaves back in the 1850s.
We are the products of the history that our ancestors chose. Products of that set of choices that we have to understand in order to escape from it.
We should go looking somewhere high. I'm only human after all. Don't put the blame on me.
That Khalif Browder story.
Yeah, like I said, it's going to be rough watching this because it just makes me mad. But
but it's going to be worth
I've
it.
mentioned in some of our other podcasts about the Nixon administration, the prison bed crisis, and how they had to over police black communities. So the calculations were that 110% of all black criminals had to be incarcerated, meaning a bunch of innocent people had to go down. So that was just the calculation that they made to maintain this system. So it's infuriating.
It's a must
how
watch.
This is not required watching by every high school student is just shameful. Like what do you not want to know? And like you said, they're panicking because they know that this information is out there. And it's well presented and it's convincing. And if these MAGA Trumpers were to actually see something like this, at least half of them will just be like, okay, I've been on the wrong, I've been bamboozled my whole life. I had no idea.
This is what they're doing right now. Red states are forming a nation within a nation with laws that recreate a pre-1960s world. They are, like I said, they are in panic mode, like serious panic mode. I won't read it all here, for our listeners, viewers, but I will post this link in the description so you can go listen to it and read it for yourself, because I think there's a little track here. Listen to the article. They'll read the article for you. But so I will post this in the description. Let me see. Oh, I can play this though. I will play this. Let me play this here.
New evidence that America's culture wars are having a financial impact on companies supporting the LGBTQ plus communities. Brands like Target and Kohl's, among a number of companies facing backlash, even threats against their employees for promotions and merchandise reaching out to the LGBTQ plus community. Bud Light's sales have suffered since partnering up with a transgender influencer, Dylan Mulvaney. That, of course, sparked a customer boycott. But what are the other factors at play here? CNN chief business correspondent and early start anchor Christine Romans is with us. Ron Brownstein back as well, CNN senior political analyst. Christine, is it really that simple? Oh, these things happen. Oh, there was a backlash. There was a big move on the right to try to get people to boycott these companies. And now all of a sudden they're floundering?
Look, there are other trends, business trends at play here, but I think it caught the C-suites by surprise, this right-wing culture warrior movement. Inclusion has always been good business for these companies.
Sharon.
Their employees want it. Their customers want it. It's always been a good business. And on earnings calls for years, you've heard these CEOs and CFOs talk about inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And all of a sudden, they're a little bit quieter about that because they're seeing these instances where their brand has been pilloried for being inclusive. And so they're trying to figure out how to tread this water. But inclusion is good for business, and they know that. They're just trying to figure out how in the world do you navigate like Target or Bud Light when you have so many people online that are demanding that you boycott a product simply for being inclusive.
You know what's interesting is the new target of some of these groups, Chick-fil-A, staved off a boycott because they acknowledged they had a DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion executive, and they were looking for someone 10 years ago holding up a Chick-fil-A stand, which to some people was your way of showing where you stood on some of these issues.
Yeah, you know, these boycotts have to be seen, I think, as part of a broader movement. I mean, the red states, in many ways, are building a nation within a nation on all sorts of issues: LGBTQ rights, voting rights, abortion rights, book bans, classroom censorship. And this is extending that attempt to kind of impose those values onto the corporate sector. But as Christine said, they are cross-pressured. I mean, they're looking at their future. A majority of everybody under 18 in this country are kids of color. 1/5 of Gen Z identifies as somewhere in LGBTQ. 2/5 of them do not belong to any organized religion. So the attempt to kind of impose the values and to force companies to toe the line of the values of one segment of society really puts them in a hard place. And ultimately, they have to decide whether they're going to embrace this changing inclusive America or whether they're going to back down in the face of this kind of pressure.
This is going to feel like a rhetorical question, but I mean it very seriously. As from both a political and a business standpoint, as you're looking at this, right? Inclusion is good for business. How and where is exclusion good for business or for politics when you're narrowing your pool?
Yeah. Well, look, it's very different between the red states and the blue and purple states. I mean, in the red states, you have Republican coalitions that are running state government with an electoral coalition that is fundamentally rooted in the parts of the state that are not changing. They're basically non-urban, older, white voters, and they are using that to impose the values of that coalition on changing places before the new demography maybe changes the political balance in a place like Texas. And so you see half the country moving in this direction, and then these boycotts are kind of the business flank of that same effort that in many ways is attempting to reverse what has been 6 decades of nationalizing more rights and creating common rights that are available in every state. I mean, we are moving back toward a pre-1960s world where your basic civil rights and civil liberties depended much more on your zip code. And I think, look, in some ways, this is like the period before the Civil War. No institution was equally credible on both sides of the sectional divide. And these companies, much as they want to stay out of it, ultimately have to decide, are they going to embrace the changing America, or they're going to embrace this effort to, in effect, make America great again by going back to older rules and older values.
How they respond is critical, because this has been one of the things is they've sometimes responded badly.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, in the Bud Light case, it was a single Instagram post that blew up into this huge thing. In the Target situation, it was threats against their customers, right? With this pride stuff was on display. They were having threats against their employees.
Yeah.
You know, how you respond by not giving in to the right-wing attack mob, but acknowledging, you know, your position. I think that's, for C-suites, that's what they've got to figure out. The rapid response for the communications teams has got to be better.
You could lose either way
Yeah.
with that.
The pressure is working on the C-suites. They are pulling back.
All right, Christine, Ron, thank you very much. Let's now keep a close eye on.
Yeah, this is. Go ahead and play it. It's only 1:37.
Okay.
Red states are forming a nation within a nation with laws that recreate a pre-1960s world.
You can see the
CNN
speed.
analyst Ron Brownstein, a senior editor for The Atlantic, argued that many Republican-led states are essentially creating completely different countries within the borders of the United States. Appearing on CNN, Brownstein argued that many red states seem to be in a race to roll back a wide array of freedoms, with a particular focus on women's rights and LGBTQ rights. I think that they are building a nation within a nation on all sorts of issues: LGBTQ rights, voting rights, abortion rights, these book bans, classroom censorship, he said. He then argued that these efforts have created areas of the country where many areas have vastly different legal landscapes for citizens simply depending on where they live. In other news, much worse than it looks, Morning Joe says GOP showing signs of turning against Trump, that same effort that in many ways is attempting to reverse what has been 6 decades of nationalizing more rights and creating common rights that are available in every state, he said. I mean, we are moving back toward a pre-1960s world where your basic civil liberties depended much more on your zip code. These efforts got a big boost last year when the Supreme Court overturned the 50-year precedent that guaranteed women's rights to have an abortion, although Republicans have faced an electoral backlash on the issue of abortion rights in both the 2022 midterm elections and more recent special elections. Watch the video below or at this link.
Yep, they are fighting a losing battle. I mean, they're kicking up enough dust to cause people grief, but it's going to be a losing battle.
Perhaps, or it might not. They might actually win. I mean, you could argue they've already won. I mean, this has been a very far right-wing country for pretty much its entirety. So, yeah, sometimes on this, on the podcast, I've said, yeah, I kind of want them to succeed so that they shoot themselves in the foot. But at the same time, we're also just shifting right along with them. So it's like, oh, good, they did it. There's just a level of derangement and severe sickness in the souls of Americans. I think we have a very severe, serious moral decline and an ethical, abandonment, just total capitulation.
And I will say again, if there's anybody out there that's organizing, because I, for one, am not going to fare well in an authoritarian fascist society. I will refuse to bow down to those, people. I'm not. I'm just not going to be one of those. What's that? What was that show? With the women that were in their little cloaks and their little. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna. Handmaid's Tale. That's not gonna be me. I'm not gonna do that. So if there's anyone organizing to fight back, because the only thing that's going to work is a financial boycott. That's what we have to work with. We have to financially cripple this country. Point blank simple. Now I know I'm not the only one thinking that. I've heard other people talking about it. I'm just not one that knows how to start the organization, but I can help, keep it going and sharing and things like that, because that's where I am right now. Somebody's got to be out there shutting it down, and that's both parties. I'm not, the Democrats are not doing what they were voted in to do. I am really not looking forward to the election season coming up with all them begging and sending emails asking for donations, because like I do every time they send me an email, I find out who it is and I go directly to them and I tag them and I say, stop asking people that have no money because of this economy for donations, not even $5, because y'all have your insider trading and your stock buybacks and all that, your investments. Plus, you have your executive $300,000 a year or $35,000 a year for your food allotment, and you're getting paid 150 something $1,000 a year. I tell them all that. Stop asking people. Go dip into your investments, your stocks, and all that money y'all got. Dip into that to help with your campaign. Stop begging people for $5. I do that every year.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the financial advisors. I always tell you, other people's money. Always use other people's money. So, why would they use their own money to run? That's for them to, take, baths in their cash. They're
Yeah.
gonna use even people even richer than them to
Hi,
bankroll their
Chrissy. Chrissy's here. Hi, Chrissy. Yeah, I just let them know. I'm like, you're at the wrong email trying to ask me for some money because I have no money. Shoot, y'all got stock money and portfolios and everything. Chrissy, are you back at home, Chrissy? Are you off the road? Are you listening to us on the road? I think I got. Hold on a second. I think I got one more video here. Let's see. No, that wasn't the video. Are you driving? Okay, so we're talking to Chrissy while she's driving. Charles, say hi. He's waving. Charles is waving. Did you mute yourself, Charles?
No,
Oh, okay.
but I'm waiting for the video.
Okay. This is it. I'm not sure if I could play that because of copyright. Hold on. So, okay, I will play the video, but I have to mute the song because I don't want to get a copyright strike. So, I like that song though. I wish I could play that song. I don't know. Maybe I won't get a copyright strike. We'll see.
I'm from outer space, I got Milky Way for blood, evolution in my veins. I'm gone, I've been far away, I'm illuminated, I'll make a move, start a waves. I've been dreaming about flying for a long time. I had a vision from the place they wanna co-sign. Artificially intelligent AI. I'm your future, past and present, I'm a fine line. Yeah, I'm a vessel of this illusion. I am not really here, I'm an intrusion. I don't swim or sink, I just float. I don't need gravity, I just need growth.
So I will actually post the artist that does that song. I will post her link so you could go listen to like the full version of her song because she's awesome. It's she's like a really eccentric like black artist, and I love her and her voice. So, but that was a video response to some people that were having problems with Juneteenth, and they needed a little reminder, like they were saying how divisive it was, and it's not divisive. So they had to have little reminders of what was going on during 1776.
Yeah, just so you know that this whole notion of divisive is their little dog whistle to the MAGAs. You know, their refrain on how they approach racism is that people who talk about racism are the racists because they're talking about race and they're being divisive. That's the worst sin, apparently, according to these MAGA white, Trumper, whatever, that if only you didn't talk about the divisive issue of race, then we could go back to business as usual, which is
being racist
perfect for them.
And if
It's
it were that
absurd and
easy,
it's bizarre.
right? But
Yep.
if it were that easy, it's like I always say to them, the ones that are like, well, just don't talk about it, or why does everything have to be about race? And then I counter that and say, exactly, why does everything have to be about race? Because
Exactly.
when we have to fill out our applications for school and college and medical and insurance and home loans and buying cars, driver's license, everything has a race box. Black people didn't put that there. So why does everything have to be about race? I'd like to know too.
Well, when it comes to government, it's so that they can track, so that they can see if there is discrepancy.
We're the only people in the world that does that. Because I talk to other people in foreign countries. They don't do that.
Yeah, but
they're amazed.
yeah,
They're
but
just like,
not that many foreign countries are as diverse as the United States.
right.
If any,
But
I mean,
it's
frankly.
still just the idea. It's just like, okay, why is everything about race?
Without those boxes, we wouldn't know a fraction of what we know about disparities according to race.
Well, that's what the census is for.
No, the census happens only 10 years, and
Yeah.
it only determines populations according to race such that you can get your proper funding from the federal government. But that's it. Doesn't track anything else. It doesn't track school admissions. It doesn't track, discrepancies in home loans. So to this day we know that there's a 2-to-1 discrepancy, given all things being equal, income levels, etc. For Black people getting home loans. You still see institutional racism. So there's only one way of tracking that.
Well, that wouldn't be the case if they didn't have the race box, though. Everybody'd be on an even playing field.
No, I'm sorry. Racism would exist. Racism is. Let's not get into it now, but racism doesn't exist because you have to check a box. Racism is deeply embedded in every part of this culture, society, the imagination of individuals.
So
And
that would
whether
be
you
one
check a
of
box or
the
not.
that would be one of the things to break it down, though. Like we're trying to break
No.
down the system.
No, you can't. Again, you couldn't track it then. You would never be able to track it. I mean, we know sociologists can study internal documents and outcomes by looking at, so that's exactly how we know all the massive statistics that we know about whether it's higher mortality for Black people when it comes to every single chronic disease out
Okay,
there.
well, I understand that. I understand that as well, but it's also being used for just point blank discrimination because somebody at a loan office just sees, what's checked, the race box is checked, they're going to throw that application in the trash.
I think that maybe, but I think that part is actually hidden. Once it gets inputted, that's all part of that goes into the black box just purely for tracking. I don't think that actually comes up when
Trump's a prime example of
purposes. It doesn't actually come up.
Trump did that though. He and his daddy. They put C for colored on the application and they put them in
Yeah,
the trash.
that was again, that was a separate thing that they did.
So I mean, it's I guess for the tracking and I guess for studies and
there's
things like
no
that.
other way to track racial discrepancies
I
in
agree.
every single social indicator, whether
But
it's death rates, mortality rates, infant death rates, discrepancies in home loans, incarceration, you name it. The only way we know and track verifiable racism in this country and its opposite. So you can also track, for example, how well German Americans do, how well Asian Americans do, how well Jewish Americans do. You can see that they're above average in a huge number of areas. You can track all these things. It's important.
okay. So
And
then
again,
again,
for the most part, I mean, unless it's
right.
abused, it's it's part of the box that goes into that gets hidden into the system, and it's flagged on that thing, but it's not like it's sorted for that. It's like, oh, only give me white. It's
Well, but it is used for, it is actually used for that though. I mean, it
it
was
may or may
just
not.
a
I
few
don't
months
know.
ago that there was a tech company that said white only. That's all the only applications they wanted was just white only.
Yeah, but that's illegal.
I know, but they did it. I mean, really,
I'm sure
okay,
they
that's
did.
subjective. That's actually subjective these days. What's illegal? Because I
No, it's
mean, Trump,
on a federal level. You are not allowed to do that.
but they got caught, but they were
Yeah,
doing it though.
yeah, and it's
Okay,
illegal.
hi, okay, fiercely
I'm not
boss.
saying that people don't do it
Thank
or that it
you.
happens de facto. Sure, it
Yeah,
does happen. Oh, hey,
she says, yep, I'm gonna post her comment. You're absolutely right. We do have a lot of work to do. Because it's got to be some way, like because I see what Charles was saying too about the having to track things because we're so diverse. But they have made it to where it makes it too easy for people to discriminate as well.
I think it's already too easy. I'm not that concerned about that. I think that racism is alive and well and kicking. It doesn't need any. It doesn't need additional things to help it keep going. It's doing just fine, and that's why we have to be able to track it. Especially when it comes to, for example, for policing and incarceration, we have to have that. Otherwise, we'd never know.
We have gone over an hour. So this was a good show. Thank you everybody for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fiercely Boss. And actually, Chrissy, while you're here, I'm going to I had a let me see if I could pull this up. So we had a troll comment last week on our video, one of our videos. And then as quickly as they posted, let me see, is this the comment here? Yeah, I took a screenshot of it. So they tried to delete it. So it didn't make any sense. So I said I was gonna give this troll a shout out on our next podcast, which is now. So I'm gonna show this this screenshot here and see if we can make any sense out of this here. Okay, so it says it was comments on the indictment watch with Trump finally be held accountable. So the troll says, I sure hope so. I farted last night. I mean, he farted last night and needs to be in jail for that. Deadly gas that is going to harm everyone. After all our feelings, hearsay can be used in a court of law to put Trump in jail now or Trump 2024. That's our troll. So if anybody out there can make sense,
He's trying to say after all our feelings / hearsay. He doesn't know how to spell hearsay. Can be used in a court of law
to put Trump in jail now or Trump 2024.
It's not a big surprise that right-wing trolls and stuff are profoundly illiterate.
So, like I said, I wanted to give our troll a shout out, and it's posted here for the whole world to see. So, any other trolls out there, if you like to engage with our videos, as long as they're not like threatening comments or anything like that, we'll give you a shout out as well. We'll give them all a shout out. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us for tonight's show, and we will see you on the next podcast. Bye.
Bye.